What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about my top 5 baits for the month of May. We love doing these videos. It's a challenge for us because we really have to limit our arsenal or our tackle box or our boat, if you will, to just 5 techniques. So it's always a little bit of a challenge, but I am always up for a challenge. So Matt and I, we love doing these videos. First and foremost, it is the month of May. So what you have, depending on where you are in the country, you basically have fish in all 3 phases of the spawn. You have pre-spawn, so fish getting ready to stage to move up. They're probably already staging. You have full-blown spawn, so you got sight fish, bed fish, and then you have the post-spawn. You have those fish that are done doing their spawn. They're moving out. They're backing out away from those bays, and some of those fish are going to go deep. They're going to end up out on your ledge. Those are your ledge fish, your rock pile fish. So those are your deep summer fish, and they're in transition to get to those locations. So unless you're in the deep south or far up north, most likely you have fish in all 3 phases. So that is really, really important to understand and kind of get your psyche, get your mental game set up for that, because any day on the water can be a little bit of a curveball. You know, that transition period is always an adjustment period for the fish, for the angler. You know, you have your temps rising, beautiful spring sunny days for the most part. You know, where you were catching them last week, the end of April, might not be where you're catching them the first week of May, right? They're moving in or they're moving out. So you're going to have to kind of cover water to see where they're at. The next big tip that I want to give you is think about your bait fish and think about the shad spawn. That is really, really important this time of the year, especially, well, you have to have shad in your lake, but especially if you are a shad-based fishery. If your fish are on threadfin shad, you most likely have a shad spawn going that you might not know about. Typically it happens in the low light conditions, either late in the evening, at night, or first thing in the morning. So if you can get out early, set that alarm clock early, get out before that sun is up on the water, be looking for a shad spawn. Typically these fish are doing it on hard surfaces. So main lake rock points, jetty walls, anything that kind of has a gravelly or riprap or a hard surface is typically where you're going to find the shad doing their spawn, and it's going to be up shallow. And you might be asking, why is this important? Those fish move right up and they blast those shad as they're spawning. So getting into my first bait, thinking about the shad spawn, my number 1 bait this time of the year, especially early morning, is going to be a spinnerbait. I just did a full in-depth spinnerbait video, so I'm not gonna go too in-depth with a spinnerbait, but I'm going with either the Megabass, the SV3, or the Damiki TOT. I'm going double willow blades because I'm trying to mimic or imitate those shad up there super shallow. Now, the reason I'm going with a spinnerbait, I'm getting some flash, I'm getting some vibration, but most importantly, I'm weedless. The worst thing you could do is fire up your lipless crankbait or whatever bait up there on that location where those bombs are dropping, those shad are spawning, and you get hung up, and now you have to go up there to get your bait unhung and you ruin the spot. So that spinnerbait, it's the best of both worlds. It mimics a school of bait fish really, really well, and it's fairly weedless. So that's my number 1 bait for the month of May if that shad spawn is going on. So just like every video, I'll link my favorite baits down below in the video description with favorite colors and all that good stuff. But think about what is going on in your fishery. So with that in mind, my number 2 bait is going to be some kind of swim bait. Okay? The cool thing with the spinnerbait is it doesn't matter if those fish are in the pre-spawn or post-spawn transition. You can cover a lot water, you can fish it fairly quickly. I'm throwing a 1/2 ounce or maybe a little heavier if I'm going out deep. Maybe I'm trying to get those fish in the post-spawn transition going out deeper to those ledges, but you can cover water. The swim bait, same deal. I'm looking for active fish. I'm not looking for fish on beds. I'm not looking for, you know, sight fish. I'm looking for staging fish. Now, it doesn't matter if you have shad spawn going on or you're fishing a row of docks that those fish are pulling into a backwater. They're suspending under those docks. Well, I guess now we're talking about sight fish. You're not bed fishing, but you're sight fishing them. You know, the glide bait. If you want an easy bait to throw, the S-Waver 168. Now there's hundreds of good swim baits on the market. If you're new to the swim bait game or you want to try and get into it, I don't think there's a better bait on the market than the S-Waver 168 as far as price. It's all relative, right? Price for the swim bait and just big fish mojo. I can't tell you how many giants Matt and I have caught with that bait right there, the S-Waver 168. But it's the best of both worlds. You can cover water. If you are fishing an area where those fish are transitioning in or transitioning out from their spawning bay, typically they stop and hang out on those isolated pieces of cover. So your brush piles, your dock lines, lay downs, maybe a rock pile off of a main lake point that separates the two spawning bays. Throw that swim bait out there, just reel it back. It's a very, very easy bait to fish. Every 5 or 6 handle turns, do a twitch, twitch, get that bait darting right and then left, or left and then right, and that's 9 times out of 10 when you're gonna get your bite. Now, if you're a guy that's saying, man, I know that they're catching giants on swim baits or glide baits, it's just not for me, I threw this one in there for you too. Just a basic 4.3 or 4.8 Kitech on a flashy swimmer. Again, if you're in that scenario where you're up shallow early with that shad spawn, that bait works great too. It's fairly weedless, has some flash, but this is just an easy bait to throw. Fire it out there, just reel it back. You don't have to add any rod twitches if you don't want. You don't have to add any reel twitches. I highly suggest it just to give that blade a little different cadence, a little bit change in directional change, a little change in momentum, kind of lets that blade fly out if you add that twitch or your handle turn. But it's a fairly easy bait to throw, and you don't have to worry about throwing the glide bait. So some kind of swim bait, especially if those fish are in less than, I'm gonna say 10 feet of water, okay? Glide bait has great drawing power. If you wanna know what kind of fish live in your fishery, spend a day throwing a glide bait. You might get your heart broke, but you are gonna learn the caliber of fish in your fishery. That glide bait has a lot of pull, and fish are just curious. They want to see what the heck that is. So run down that dock line or fire it out over that brush pile, and you might see some of the biggest fish you've ever seen in your fishery. So boom, boom, spinner baits, swim baits, 1 and 2. Number 3, actually, I'm gonna back up. I pulled this one last minute because I know there's always the argument about spinnerbait and bladed jig or chatterbait. So I'm gonna throw a chatterbait in with the spinnerbaits, okay? So in that first category, I'm gonna throw that chatterbait. Typically, I'm going some kind of shad color, and that's gonna be basically in all these baits this time of the year for me, because I'm fishing mainly shad-based fisheries. So in that first category, let's go ahead and throw that chatterbait, that bladed jig, in with the spinnerbaits, because they kind of play in the same kind of situations, if you will. So spinnerbaits / chatterbait, swim baits. Next up for me is going to be some kind of crankbait. So I grabbed, what did I grab? I grabbed 3 square bills and 3 deep cranks, okay? Let's start with the square bills. We'll work shallow and then we'll go deeper. You guys know how much we love the biggie, the River Sea biggie. Great knock, single knock in there. It's a great bait. It deflects really, really well. If again, you find yourself fishing the shallow end, the fish are moving in, you're fishing the shallow end of this transition, a square bill is really hard to beat, especially if you're covering water. You might have some riprap walls you're covering, or kind of this do nothing kind of bank, but there's chunk rock mixed in. That square bill is an awesome bait to cover water and get big bites. Again, you're burning it, you're pausing, you're getting real active with that bait. You know, it's diving down, pausing, backing up a little bit, burning. So you can really entice those big staging females to eat a square bill. So the biggie, I threw that in there. The OG4, that's the Odds Garage. This is a balsa bait. It's a silent bait. It's high float, and depending on your water temps, you know, I should have talked about this a little bit earlier. Mid 60s, high 60s, low 70s is typically when you get that shad spawn deal going. So depending on the water temp in your fishery, that will come into play. It also comes into play when you're trying to pick what style of crankbait do you want? Do you want something that has high float? Do you want something with a tight action or a real wide action, real wide wobble? As your water warms, you want to go with a more aggressive wobble on your crankbait. It doesn't matter if you're talking shallow cranks or deep cranks. So we'll get into that in just a second. So that's why I have three. I have the warmer water, the biggie. A little bit colder water, I got the OG4. It's a great, quiet, silent bait. And then this guy right here. Matt and I have talked about this bait for years. I still can't believe they're available, but the BDS line of square bills by Lucky Craft. This is the BDS 1, okay? It's another silent bait. This is a bait that you can fish ultra shallow. I've caught so many big ones on this. I can't believe they're still available at Tackle Warehouse. I used to buy these things from Japan. I used to buy them on eBay, but they still have them. So get them while you can. I think I ordered 20 of them just to have, but a BDS, this is the 1, the 2's great, the 3's great, the 4 getting into the larger size, that's great if you're fishing a gizzard shad fishery, but the BDS line of square bills, if you're looking for a great square bill to throw super shallow, that is a must. Okay, now on the flip side, let's talk about those fish that are transitioning out to the deeper water. We've taught for years, you know, where do these fish go after the spawn? Some of them stay shallow. In the summertime, those are the fish you catch on a frog, you catch flipping or punching, right? Some fish go deep. Those are the fish you catch on hair jigs, flutter spoons, deep crankbaits. So I'm not sure what the percentage is, you know, let's just say half stay shallow, half go out deep, get on your ledges. This is where the deep crank comes into play. So in this category, I just have crankbait. So I have 6 different baits in this technique, in this category, but it depends on your fishery and the water temps, okay? So as we work through the colder water warming up, I'm going to start with our crankbait, Tactical DD. You guys know that we designed this to be a cold water crankbait, but we've smashed in the middle of summer on it. We've smashed in Mexico on it. It has a tighter wobble, a tighter action than the next 2 that I'm going to talk about. So if you're transitioning from that mid 60s, you're kind of, you know, teeter-tottering around those low to mid 60s, go with this guy. 15 to 18 feet typically is the depth I'm getting out of those. Next, the DT16, a little bit wider, aggressive kick to it. It's gonna get down to like your, I don't know, 15 to, let's say 15 to 17 feet, okay? The DT16, I love that color right there. And then as you transition into your warmer weather, your warmer water months, that's when I change and go to the Strike King 6XD. That's when I change my colors from like your real natural shad, bait fish colors, and I start going with more your sexy shads, your chartreuse blues, more of your summer patterns as we get into the latter days of the month, later days in May, okay? So, I mean, you can't get any more different than these guys right here, but they both come into play, especially in the month of May. Okay, so we got that. Well, we got spinnerbaits and chatterbait. We got swimbaits and crankbait. That's three categories. Next category that I want to talk about is going to be a version of top water, okay? It doesn't matter if you're in a lowland reservoir, a highland reservoir, a natural lake, or a river system. Somewhere on your fishery in the month of May, they will be eating a topwater. Now, what's really important to take into consideration, just like you do with your square bills and water temp and your crankbaits, is the speed of the bait. When you cast, let's say, a buzzbait, you fire a buzzbait out, I'm doing the whopper plopper sound. You know, you're doing the burning, basically keeping that buzzbait afloat by covering water and bringing that bait to you. It's covering a ton of water. You cast out, you bring it back. I typically don't start throwing those style of baits until maybe June, right? As we get into the warm weather, the hot weather, the real warm water months. So right now, I'm throwing top waters that don't cover a lot of water. And if I'm throwing let's say a whopper plopper, either the 90 size or the 110 size, I'm throwing a little bit downsized version. I'm throwing a bait that I can fire it out there. I can make, 10 or 12 handle turns and then kill it. It's not going to sink like a buzzbait. I don't have to burn it back to the boat to keep that thing floating, right? I can pause it. For the most part, I'm throwing a popper. This comes into play with the shad spawn deal we talked about earlier. It comes into play as you're covering shoreline and you see a laydown, you see a shade pocket behind or below a dock. You can fire a popper, make a nice good cast, an accurate cast into that shade, and bloop, 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 let it sit. Bloop. Again, you're not covering a ton of water, but you're sitting there with that bait over that bass's head. It doesn't matter if it's a pre-spawn bass, a spawning bass, or a post-spawn bass, they will eat a popper. Two of my favorites, Mega Bass, that is the Pop Max, that is Matt Shad. That is a real good popper. And then this guy right here, this is the, I'll link it down below in the video description. This is Shimano. It's got the flash boost in it. It's called the World Pop. There we go. My brain's starting to work again. World Pop. What's cool about this bait is what you're seeing right there. Right? As that bait is sitting there, you're not giving any movement. It's sitting there in the water, and it's got the flash boost in there that's mimicking the scales flickering on a shad. Okay? So if you're looking for a great clearer water popper with a lot of visibility, that is a must. That's quickly becoming my favorite popper. So these are my favorite two. Boom, boom. If you want something you can just cast and retrieve, go with that whopper plopper. Again, downsize, that 90 or 110 size. I typically don't throw the 130 until we get into like June, but that guy right there, again, I'm going shad colors. I'm going shad, I'm going white, I'm going black. Typically those are the three colors on my top waters, but that is a must if you're trying to cover water with a top water. Last but not least, it fits right into play with the poppers. It's going to be a popping frog, a real natural color. This is the jackal. This is the gavacho. It's a real natural shad bluegill-esque frog. It's a popping frog. So again, you can bloop bloop, let it sit. You don't have to work it real fast. So those guys that have grass already coming up in their fishery, or maybe you're in a flooded water, maybe your high water situation, and you have your shoreline is underwater a little bit, and you want to throw something that you can pop and walk, but you can't throw the treble hooks, check out that guy right there. Okay, now that's 4. Last but not least, you got to have some kind of finesse presentation in there. So I got two for you in the finesse category. Got this guy right here, a Senko, and this guy right here, a shaky head. Okay, Yamamoto Senko, that's electric shad. This is a 6-inch worm. That is the Magic Worm by Missile. You guys have heard us talk a lot about that lately, but more importantly, rigged on a shaky head. Okay, where do these come into play? Up shallow, super finessey. Maybe you're skipping docks, maybe you're skipping shade lines, maybe you are fishing that shad spawn and you don't want to throw a real loud or real obnoxious bait up there. Go with the Senko. On the flip side, you're fishing a little bit deeper, you're fishing those transition points out, your brush piles, your channel swings, your little bit deeper breaks. That's where I'm going with the shaky head. More feel with bottom contact. You got that head right there. It gets down quicker. It's weedless. You can fish it through those brush piles, and you can fish it a little bit faster than you can the weightless Senko. So either the Senko or the shaky head. That's that magic with a 6-inch Magic Worm by Missile. Another favorite is the T-Mac by NetBait. And that wraps up my top 5 techniques for the month of May. Again, guys, it's hard to kind of condense your entire arsenal into just 5 techniques. But for the most part, around the country, these techniques will work. A version of a spinnerbait or a chatterbait, a swim bait, either a glide bait or a weedless underspin flashy swimmer, Kitech. Some kind of crankbait, either the square bill or the deep crank, depending on where your fish are in that transition, a topwater, and a finesse bait. Top 5 baits for the month of May. Please leave your comments down below in the comment section. I'm curious to see what your favorite bait is going into the month of May and what you have confidence in. Again, all these baits I'll link down below in the video description so you can see our favorite colors and all that good stuff. Guys, we appreciate you watching. Hopefully this gives you confidence to go out and have success right now. The month of May, warmer weather, the fish are active, and it is a great time to be out on the water. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you learned something or like this video. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will see you guys on the next video.